racism needs a systemic response. We need a transformative approach that tackles the interconnected areas that drive racism and lead to repeated, wholly avoidable tragedies like the death of George Floyd. I'm calling on all states to stop denying and start dismantling racism, to end impunity and build trust, to listen to the voices of people of African descent.
Sahar Aziz is the director for the Center for Security, Race and Rights at Rutgers University in the U.S., and she joins us now from Newark. So, Sahar, this report was a year in the making. It did not hold back in naming and shaming the countries that, according to the report, do not sufficiently address this problem. Then again, countries don't really need to listen to the UN. So what impact do you think this will have?
I think that this is going to create an echo chamber. It will continue the echo chamber that's been created by the Black Lives Matter movement that started in the US, which is to put the voices, the experiences, and the hardships of African Americans in the US context, or people of African descent, particularly in Europe and North and South America, to put those perspectives and experiences first. Because what we have right now in our global social structure is the aftermath, or the result, the long-lasting result of European colonialism and white settler colonialism, whether it's white settler colonialism in the US, Australia, in Israel, or other countries, to name a few, or European colonialism in Africa, in Latin America, and other parts of the world, in Asia, where European nations created entire systems, social, political, economic systems, where white was superior, black was inferior, and the closer you were to black, the more inferior you were. The closer you were to white, the more superior you were. So there's a racial hierarchy that continues to infiltrate the way in which our world operates. And so I think this UN report validates that critique and is the beginning, hopefully, of more conversations, particularly among settler colonial states and former European colonial states.
And the crafters of the report spoke extremely bluntly, saying it's time to stop denying and start addressing racism. But it's really up to the countries to themselves tackle it. And we've seen in places like the U.S., especially, how difficult that is, even though equality is supposed to be at the very heart of democracy, right? So does the report address at all the obstacles within these countries to really doing something about it?
Well, the UN has, one of its limitations is that it doesn't have enforcement authority, but for arguably the Security Council. And many of these countries who are, I think, guilty of white supremacy or anti-black racism are all on the Security Council. But having said that, I think what it does is it gives fuel and it gives support to these grassroots movements in the different countries that are now becoming transnational. Social media has completely transformed activism, where what's happening, for example, in Palestine right now is on the minds of those activists in the US, because the Palestinians are saying Palestinian Lives Matter, arguing that we are the repressed, we are the most inferior group within the Israeli-Palestine context, similar to blacks, as an example. And so this UN report is going to give fuel or give support to these activists that are now acting transnationally. And as each group of people in a particular country are successful incrementally in producing systemic change, it emboldens other groups in Europe and other groups in other countries. So it's, again, it's one incremental step, but I think it has a major validation effect for these grassroots movements. But you are correct. At the end of the day, it is the people who pay the taxes, the people who vote, the people who are residents of a particular country who bear the burden of determining whether they want their societies to continue engaging in systemic racism against blacks in particular and other minorities. But one other point I want to make is when every time you are trying to make systemic changes, the group or groups of people that are winning from the current system will fight back. And that is expected. So we are seeing that in the US, where now critical race theory, which is the intellectual frame through which anti-black racism is analyzed and has been in existence for decades, is now becoming racist. So white people, especially conservatives, are arguing that critical race theory, which is aimed at stopping anti-black racism, is itself racist against whites. So that's a very common hegemonic co-optive strategy, but I don't think the younger generation, at least in the US, is going to fall for it, because they see, they are looking around them and realizing that there are very few blacks in power, very few blacks among the very wealthy, very few blacks that are presidents of universities in Congress. It's not representational to the population, and there is an overrepresentation of blacks in jails, in poverty, in unemployment lines. And you can take that example, or you can take that reality and extend it to other minority groups where it's not as severe, but the same systems are in place in this racial hierarchy. White is the most superior, black is the most inferior, and everything in the middle is along a hierarchy. And that's what needs to be dismantled.
Yeah, and for the time being, we're going to continue to see that pushback. But thanks so much, Sahar.